Alexander Spesivtsev. His mother, a thin, short, and pretty old woman, chose her son's victims and brought them to his house. Alexander Spisivtsev, Novokuznetsk Monster or Siberian Ripper. The man was born on March 1, 1970 in Novokuznetsk. He had an older sister, Nadezhda, and a father, Nikolai, who loved alcohol and beautiful women and never hid his infidelities from his mother. Lyudmila, Spisivtsev's mother, endured for a long time and decided to divorce only after 15 years. Alexander was born full-term but with a slight weight deficit and grew up a sickly child. So mother Lyudmila always perceived him as a sweet son, a basket son. Lyudmila's care got to the point where the boy slept in the same bed with her until he was 12 years old. He grew up a mad bully. He lived in a high-rise building on Pioneersky Prospect, and all the neighbors suffered from him. The stashes in the locks, the burned mailboxes, the pressed buttons in the elevator, all this was Sasha's handiwork. By the way, the family never rode an elevator, and they always walked up to the 9th floor of their 357th apartment. At some point, Spisivtsev decided that his idol was Adolf Hitler. All the walls in the entrance were covered with swastikas. When the neighbors complained about Sasha to his mother, she always defended her son in every possible way and said that he was an angel of God. The family was very introverted, and in principle, they lived in such a small dimension and everyone around them was the enemy. Spisivtsev began stealing not only newspapers and magazines from mailboxes, but also bicycles. One day, he broke into the school office and stole radio components. He was noticed, and they even wanted to send him somewhere like a correction class. Well, then the mother defended her son. She worked as a caretaker at one of Novokuznetsk's schools, and that's when she lost her job because she was a thief. Later, the woman got a job in court as an assistant to a blind lawyer and began stealing criminal case materials. At the same time, her daughter Nadezhda, who worked as a secretary in this court, helped her. That's where Alexander's inadequacy comes in, because he and his mother always looked at these criminal case materials, all these corpses, and investigated these crimes in the evening. Even though Alexandra had never been interested in anything in her life, in 1988, Alexander joined the army, but he failed to serve because he was diagnosed with mental problems, and he went to a mental hospital for treatment. After a short treatment at the age of 21, he met 17-year-old Evgenia Guselnikova in 1991. Spisivtsev was introduced to Evgenia's family as her potential fiancé, but the wedding never took place because he just started to reproach her for nothing, and eventually beat her to such a state that she ended up in the hospital with a head injury. And later, Spisivtsev came to the hospital, and instead of apologizing and crawling on his knees in front of her, he began to finish her off. Since the girl left the hospital, she somehow got into Spisivtsev's house again. No one knows if he lured her on purpose, or if she came to sort things out with him. In fact, she never came out of it alive again. By that time, his mother and sister had moved away from Spisivtsev to allow the newlyweds to establish a common life. At that time, loud music was coming from Alexandra's apartment, and the neighbors were already used to it. But what was he hiding behind it? At that time, he bullied the girl, starved her, cauterized various parts of her body, and cut her up. Evgenia's parents didn't care at all for a long time. They also thought she was building a relationship with her future husband. But later they caught themselves and the operatives broke into Alexandra's door. What did they see? Evgenia was lying dead in bed, all cut up and tortured, and Spasiva was lying on the floor next to her. Medical experts have determined that Guselnikova died of sepsis, and he genuinely told the investigators that she died on her own. He fed her, took care of her, she did not want to eat, and that it wasn't his fault. But the most interesting thing is that when they left the apartment, he shouted that it was their own fault that they did not take care of their daughter, that she was raped. That is, he talked about himself as about another person. Mom was so offended by the comments about her son from the press that she even threw stones at the investigators, and soon Alexander went back to compulsory treatment in a mental hospital. While in it, for some reason, he implanted a small ball under the skin of his penis in order to give women more pleasure and receive it during sex. It was a bad decision because everything was festering, and he had problems with potency in general. After 3 years of treatment, Alexander left the psychiatric hospital and began living in an apartment with his mother and sister again. But he was not going to start any social relations. He often hung out at the Novokuznetsk railway station, drank all kinds of port wine with drunks, local marginals, and he liked that he brought them this alcohol and, as it were, on a little of them with my life. At the end of February 1996, at the train station, he met a kindergarten nanny. 20-year-old Lena Trunova Sviveshka agreed to visit him, and there they began a dialogue about this metal ball, about this pellet that was inserted into Spisivtsev's penis. Trunova scoffed at his problem, and a quarrel arose between them. You fall asleep with pain and wake up with pain. Then someone else talks about this disease to your face or reminds you of this topic. I just hate such people, the words of Alexander Spisivtsev. It was from this moment that the series of murders of Alexander Spisivtsev began. Elena Trunova from Pesisved was very well mocked. He dismembered the girl and told her mother to get rid of the remains. And she in turn took 2 buckets, put the body down, took them out and buried them at night. A month later, Lyudmila went back to the wasteland with buckets, in which there was already a new victim, a new girl. Their maniac killed them in his apartment. In April 1996, Spisivtsev noticed a group of teenagers aged 11 and 13, and they were hanging around the children's department store. First, he approached the students, offered them a smoke, and later offered to rob the apartment after Alexander brought the teenagers to his apartment. He took out a knife and ordered them to go to the bedroom, and later killed the teenagers one by one. After that, he took out the corpses, stacked the bodies in a corner on top of each other, covered them with a cloth and waited for the mother, and the mother cleaned everything up. Back then, she worked as a kindergarten caretaker and lived with her daughter in another apartment. The mother removed 6 corpses. Do you know what else is interesting? They had a big Newfoundland dog. For example, in 1996, Spisivtsev lured 4 girls to his place, killed them as well, and they began feeding body parts to this dog. Later, one of the victims would testify that Spisivtsev and his mother were indeed engaged in cannibalism, but the family strongly denies this fact. In this interview, Alexander and his mother argued about whether they cooked cutlets from human flesh or not. Alexander was not particularly handsome, but he was quite endearing, so the victims themselves went to his apartment. He lured both companies and siblings. They were walking and didn't even suspect that something like this could happen to the 2 of them. And Lyudmila lured one of the victims. From March to August 1996, 15 more people were killed in Spisivtsev's apartment. Evgenia, a retired neighbor, called the police and said she could smell a corpse, as well as loud music. She urgently asked the policeman to check the apartment, but he never came. That's how 11-year-old Olga and 9-year-old Alexander Spisivtsev died from the corpse of a maniac. A week later, 13-year-old Irina and 12-year-old Dmitry Vorobyov. In June 1996, decomposing body parts of Spisivtsev's victims began to be found on the banks of the Abba River. And it was already clear that a maniac was operating in the city. You know, the police could easily have found Spisivtsev, because the first thing they did was check the list of all mentally ill people. You remember that Alexander was in a mental hospital. At the time of his discharge, an error occurred and he was not recorded as a released person. That is, he was still listed in this hospital. They didn't even check on him. From June to the end of August 1996, the maniac killed 4 schoolgirls aged 15 and 15. 2 women and a 35-year-old man. The most terrible and final massacre of 3 friends took place here. 15-year-old Anastasia Brunova, her peer Evgenia Guselnikova, and 15-year-old Olga Goltsova. The schoolgirls got to know each other at the hospital because they were treated together and sometimes went out for a walk. And so, on October 24, they went for a walk and went to the grocery store for water. There they met a kind, sweet old lady who said she had trouble with her key and couldn't open the door. Her friends agreed to help her and went to the entrance. The old lady quickly opened the door, and Alexander was standing there with a huge dog. The girls asked, "Well, Grandma, why is this happening to us?" She just ordered them to go home. Spisivtsev herded them into a bedroom, and told them to wait. Genya was crying especially loudly, and he injected her with a sedative. Nadezhda took advantage of the moment and wanted to hit Spisivtsev on the head with the bottle, but missed and hit him on the shoulder. Enraged, Spisivtsev attacked Nadezhda, inflicted a very large number of stab wounds on her, and she suffered several blows to the heart area, slightly lower, somewhere near the stomach and throat. She continued to live, and I strangled her on a rope. After that, the maniac forced the girls to saw through the body, separate the flesh from the bones, and then cook soup and forced the girls to eat it. She ate the spine, and she eats the ribs really fast. Spisivtsev tells about how he fed dogs body parts of the dead. Stevens continued to torment the girls day after day. My sister was at home all this time, but my mother calmly got rid of Nadezhda. The maniac was especially cruel to Evgenia. He tortured her with a soldering iron, raped her, beat her, broke her head several times, and broke her arms. One day he went berserk and beat Brashkian's head on the floor for a long time, and then ordered Olya to do artificial respiration, and she did it for an hour, but Evgenia died anyway. Then he did not touch the body of the murdered Evgenia for 3 days, and opened the window to let the soul out. Then he ordered Olya to loosen the body. I put the corpse on in the bathroom, and put the insides in the toilet tank. You can watch this terrible crime in my Telegram channel for 10 subscribers. Olaf says that he passed through her when she asked to wash, inserted a hose into her vagina, and turned on the water. At this time, continuing to rape her. He also threatened the girl that if the police came, he would immediately kill her. And in a few days, the days before, one of the neighbors of this strange family started having bad battery life. She contacted the housing department. The foreman began to make rounds of the apartment, and when he reached Spisivtsev's apartment, Alexander said that he was insane, locked up by his mother. He was mentally ill, and he told the researcher the same version when they came for a routine check. On October 24, 1996, because it seemed strange, the researchers came to Spisivtsev. There was a terrible smoky smell in the apartment, and the maniac kept 82 pieces of his victim's wardrobe. Spisivtsev removed about 40 pieces of jewelry from his victims. Alexander was not in the apartment, but in one of the rooms they found a half-dead Olga, whom he hit several times in the stomach with an awl. The girl was taken to the hospital. She managed to give evidence, but unfortunately later died. Of course, Spisivtsev was put under surveillance. He returned to the apartment, and this is how he explained his desire for murder. There was nothing left to do. They refused to treat me. I have a weakened immune system. I wrap myself in a jacket and sweater in the summer. Look, all my hands are covered in sores. He confessed to 19 murders, although there may actually be 82 of them. He had hoped for the death penalty, but he was given 10 years in prison. He was declared insane. Then he was sent to a mental hospital in the city of Chemyshin, Volgograd region, and he still lives there in amazing conditions. With excellent nutrition, writes poetry, reads zoos, even the nails on the hands and feet are not guarded. This is occupied by the sub-sanitation workers. Lyudmila was sentenced to 13 years in prison. She was released from prison in 2009. She's moved out now. She was 80 years old in 2019, and she still hopes that Sasha will be released and the family will be reunited. That's the story. Thanks for watching. Be careful, healthy and happy. Bye everyone.